Welcome to MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 556. This program is in loving memory of Miriam Bas Eliyahu Altes Aleh HaShalom, and in merit of Baruch ben Yomen ben Menucha Lana Altes, Yekusil ben Leah Rochel and Rochel Bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Tadris ben Miriam and Sarah Bas Rochel Altes. So we are now in the last week of the month of Av, going literally into Rosh Chodesh El, Shabbos Mevorchim El, this coming Shabbos, which goes right into Rosh Chodesh on Sunday and on Monday. And it's a unique period because you're going from the saddest month of the year, going to one of the happiest months. El, Chodesh HaRachamim, the month of compassion, that in turn leads us into the month of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, and Simchas Torah. So in life, as we discuss, and we've discussed many times on this program, the calendar, the Jewish calendar, reflects, is like a mirror of the cycles of life. It's not just measuring time, it's not just giving us placeholders, time holders you can call them, to tell us where we are, but it actually reflects and captures the energy of time. Time is energy. And time is like a spiral. Not even like a cycle, a spiral. Because every year it returns to the same point but a different axis. That's why we celebrate birthdays. That's why all the Yom Tovim. Not just commemorating events that happened, but they're happening right now. So what does this time period consist of? What should be our focus as we move from the month of Av into the month of Elul? So the central themes of this we've discussed in the previous weeks. And in previous years, a good opportunity to mention ChassidusApplied.com that is our main website, where you have all Chassidus Applied materials in one place. A forum, our flagship, we'll call it our flagship website for this program and its related materials. There's a forum where you can submit your questions. All questions are acceptable. Nothing's taboo. Nothing is off limits. Completely anonymous. You also find there all the archives of previous programs, plus other materials on different Maimorim and Hemsheichim that we've taught. It's a very rich website with many, many resources. We now recently also launched an AI version where you can actually have a virtual conversation with myself. You go now to our website, meaningfullife.com, and also simonjacobson.ai. Also on WhatsApp, we have a special WhatsApp. You can WhatsApp us, and we'll get a virtual response, all taken from all our archives, from all the content, the inventory, and all the material that exists. People are speaking very highly of it, so try it out. So what should be our focus as we move from the month of Av into the month of Elul? So the central theme is the cycle of life. The cycle of life, of course, is like a wheel, a galgal achezer, a turning wheel. And as a result, there are the moments that we're up, there are moments that we're down. Now, everything is part of God's bigger plan, and everything's toward the positive. The question is only where we are in that stage. So think about navigating. It's a navigating. If you think of the weather, is a perfect example. The weather is never just completely the same. There are parts of the world the weather is more stable, but in general, weather, like seasons, it changes. There's winter, there's spring, there's summer, there's autumn. And the same thing in our lives. So going from Av to Elul is actually going from a time of where tragedies, destruction, negative things have happened throughout history. But now we're on the upturn. Right after Tisha B'Av, already in Tisha B'Av, Mashiach is born. But right after Tisha B'Av, we come to the 15th of Av, the full moon. And as we discussed at length last week and 2 weeks ago, the cycle continues and leads into the month of Elul. And Aryeh, the mazel of the month of Av, is an acronym, as the Shalah writes, Chassidus cites, for Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, Hishayin Rab. It's all born out of Aryeh, the mazel Aryeh of Chodesh Av. If you think of it historically, Moshe Rabbeinu, after the Yidden left Mitzrayim, 50 days later they received the Torah on Har Sinai. Moshe is up on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Unfortunately, the Jews build a golden calf. Moshe comes down after 40 days and 40 nights on the 17th of Tammuz and sees what's happening. He breaks the tablets, the beginning of the 3 weeks. The beginning of the tragedies that happened then, and the tragedy would happen in the subsequent years, all the way to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Breaking of the tablet, things are getting broken. But Moshe goes back up on the mountain and prays for forgiveness. First he's not successful, but then 40 days later it comes down as Rosh Chodesh El. So when the Rosh Chodesh El coming next week, Moshe is coming down from the mountain the second time, not successful, but you can't say not successful because ultimately those 40 days set the stage and built the platform upon which the next 40 days would begin on Rosh Chodesh El. And there are two opinions, the first day or second day of Rosh Chodesh El. That leads us to Yom Kippur. Through Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days of Tshuva, Yom Kippur. 30 days of El, 10 says Tshuva, Yom Kippur. Where he comes back with the second lichus. So you see there the cycle. So when he was up, when they built the golden calf and he broke the tablets, we didn't know yet where this is headed. Moshe knew. Those that were in the know knew that this will end properly, but it's the cycle of life. We, in our lives, also have these cycles. So we have to find in our life the things that have not worked so well in this time period and literally mirror and parallel the cycle of time, the cycle of the calendar that we're in right now. We're going now. Now is the time to transform the negative into positive. Or to put it better, that the negative you'll see as a stepping stone, a springboard to the positive. It feeds it. So we say, as they were oppressed in direct proportion to that, they thrived, they flourished, they blossomed. It's not just one leads to the other. One is the birth of the other. Those that sow and plant with tears, the tears become raindrops that give birth to the joy. Reaping and joy. So we are now in that place in time. So it's a very powerful time period and can be applied in personal ways to each one of our lives. Everybody has the cycles. I'm sure everybody is going through some setbacks, some challenges. It could be personal, could be in family, in community, parents and children, husbands and wives, in parnasa, livelihood, in health matters. And sadly, yes, people have lost close ones and loved ones. So what we could draw from this period in time, this energy, is the ability to gain the strength and the foresight and the vision to see it through. That's the personal application, the Chassidus applied to this time period, as we go from Of into El. El, of course, is the famous acronym, Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li. Among the different acronyms, the 5 acronyms that Rebbe focuses on, which correspond to the Shloisha Mudim Shalema Elamei Teira Avedi Milas Chasodim, and then a 4th acronym that relates to Tshuva, and a 5th one to Geula. All that is captured in the word El. I should mention, this is a good opportunity also to mention, a number of years ago, I composed a book called 60 Days, A Spiritual Guide to the High Holidays. What are the 60 days? Rosh Chodesh El through Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. The 60 days that begin next week. If I may say so myself, it's an excellent book that helps you go on a journey that doesn't begin Rosh Hashanah, that begins actually Pesach. But the 60 days focuses on Elul and Tishrei, and every day there's a thought, an exercise for the day, facts, interesting facts connected to the day, historical facts, customs, halachas. It's an interesting book. If you haven't seen it yet, I'd say it's worthwhile checking out. We also send out a daily email you can subscribe to. And there's a daily message, a daily voice message that I recorded for each of the 60 days. We'll also be doing a special series every week, a short thought for the 60 days, for each of these, for this whole entire period in time. So it is a journey, just like Moshe's journey. on the mountain, begging for forgiveness. It's a journey of a relationship of love betrayed, and love reclaimed. So it's a fascinating journey in each of our lives, that no matter what you're going through, if things are great, so if good is better, not better, as the expression goes, if good is better, is best. And if things are not, in certain areas, could be better, this is the opportune time to buy your ticket, so to speak. Here you don't have to buy anything. To get on the train of this journey, this powerful, dramatic, and transformative journey through Elul and Tishrei. And it's all being fed from Av, the second half of Av, as the moon gets fuller and leads us into Elul. So with that, we also can understand what is the significance of the acronym Elul. The most famous one is Ani l'deidi v'deidi li. What does that mean? So that means, that reflects in general every relationship. Relationship between us and Hashem, between you and Hashem, between you and your spouse, between you and your friends, between you and your children, between all relationships. There's I, l'deidi, to my beloved. V'deidi li, and my beloved to me. So first message is the reciprocity. There's always a reciprocity. A relationship consists of two people, of two individuals. Second message, not one. One is not obliterating, God forbid, the other. The second message is initiate. Ani l'deidi. It's an initiation from below, meaning asusa dilatata. There's another pasuk, it says, v'deidi li v'ani le, that goes on Chedesh Nisan, that came from above. The Eibishter lifted us up, al kamfei nesharim, on the wings of eagles, like a child that a parent picks up. There, the v'deidi li, my beloved to me, v'ani le, and I to him. But Elul is mamata l'mayl. It's our aveda, our work. Moshe is asking now for forgiveness, he's initiating. And that has unique power. L'deidi emphasizes that it's all with love. Even though they may be coming from a transgression or a setback, or we need to clean up our act, or do tshuva tata, there are things that we need to repair, especially in a situation where there may have been a betrayal, a broken promise, a broken trust, which is what happened when the Jews built the golden calf. Something broke. And yet it's all with love. L'deidi, it's my beloved. Always remember, love is the driving force. Of course you need to have chesed and gvura in every relationship. Discipline, balance, boundaries. But love, l'deidi. Chesed, ozil chesed im kuli yemin. Chesed is the driving force of all the midas. And there are many other lessons that we can learn from it. Person asks a question, what is the significance of the rose in the verse? I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. He who grazes among the roses. Hareya b'sheshanim. Ani l'deidi v'deidi li. Hareya b'shesham. The one who grazes among roses. The way it was articulated in the pasuk, I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. He who grazes among the roses. The famous teaching is that Ani l'deidi v'deidi li is the Rosh Hashanah of Elul. Does Chassidus teach that the rose is also an important part of the pasuk? Can a lesson be learned that the rose, which has beautiful fragrant petals, but also sharp thorns, represent a true love that endures through good times and bad times? And that even during bad times when we make mistakes, Hashem still loves us and gives us the opportunity to repent and repair those mistakes, especially during Elul? Absolutely. And there are many other lessons. So that's one lesson. Sheshana ben achechim is the expression of rose among thorns. Refers to some Rachel, Rivka, who grew up in the home of Besuel, of Lavan, but a Sheshana, a rose among thorns. The lesson you just mentioned is accurate. That it covers all the ground, and Elul is also repairing that which was not with the thorns, and turning them into thorns that protect the rose, the gentle, the delicate rose. Shoshana has many meanings in Kabbalah and Chassidus. You've all must have heard of the 13-petaled rose. Shoshana has a rose of 13 petals. So in Zohar, Bereshis, and other places, talks a lot about the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, that it reflects the 13 attributes of divine compassion and mercy. When were they revealed? To Moshe on Har Sinai, when he was on the third time on the mountain, and ultimately Yom Kippur. That's why we repeat it so many times at Yom Kippur. But El is called Chedesh Harachim. The Yud Gimel Midas Harachim are meir, are radiate. The Alter Rebbe's famous mashal of Melech Besada, the king in the field, he says, when he asked the question, why is the month of Elul, when they have the radiating gilui of Yud Gimel Midas Harachimim, it should all be days of Yom Tov? That's where he gives the example. The king is in the field, then you have the gilui in the field in the mundane and the weekdays. But he makes it clear that the Yud Gimel Midas Harachimim radiate in the month of Elul. That corresponds to the rose. And other explanations, you can look it up in Sefer Lekutim of the Tzemach Tzedek. It's an excellent resource I should mention. You go to Erech Shoshana, you'll have a whole bunch of different entries. Essentially an encyclopedia that gathers everything from the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Tzemach Tzedek really gathers everything from the Alter Rebbe. And you have also the Mafteh, at the end of every entry, you also have the indexes of all the Rabbeim, from the Alter Rebbe to the Rebbe. It's a good one place to go to if you want any information, and it's in alphabetical order, from Aleph to Tov, a full set. I was able to work on this set back in 1976. At the end of 76, it began. Literally, this mamish like Nittel night that Rebbe initiated it in Tov Shalamet Zayin, Tevis Tov Shalamet Zayin. Zeis Chanukah, I think it was. So that, and there's more there about Rose and Shoshana and so on. Let's move on. Next is this week is also Parsha De'eh. Leben mit der Zeit, we live with the time, as the Alter Rebbe explains. Time is living with the Parsha that we read in the time. So it has to have a connection to these themes and, of course, personal lessons in our lives. Just to add one more thing about the rose, it fits into what I said earlier about the cycle of life, from Ov to Elul, from pain to joy, from pain to compassion, you can say. So the fact there's thorns, at the same time the beautiful rose, all of it is all part of that story. It's all part of one reality. So Parsha De'eh, so what are the central themes? What are the and personal and global lessons can we learn from this week's Parsha? So Parsha De'eh begins like the Pasuk says, behold, I give you today two paths, bracha, the path of blessing, the path of the opposite. And of course the goal is, and he talks about blessings and the opposite of blessings, the goal is to choose blessing, the path of blessing. And he continues, talks about the Beis HaMikdash. This chapter also talks about giving meiser, tzedakah, nosen titen, posach tiftach. So the Parsha has a number of themes that are all relevant to us. Let me touch upon the name of the Parsha, as the Rebbe would often emphasize that the name captures the essence. Shmoyeh Sherikale B'Loshen HaKedesh. So behold, Re'eh. And what does the first verse say? Behold here. Neisen L'fnechem. Neisen is like a matona. Kol ha-neisen b'ayin yofer neisen. When you give something, you give it with a good eye. It's a gift. So the obvious question the Rebbe asks, is the gift of blessing is very obvious. Clear. But what's the gift of the opposite of blessing? Why Neisen L'fnechem? Neisen L'fnechem blessing. What's the gift of giving someone the opposite of a blessing? So the answer is, beautiful answer. The gift is to know what path to go on in life and what path not to go on. It's not the gift of the negative. It's to know it's a negative thing and know not to go there. When you're traveling on a road, you come to a fork in the road and you ask someone, where do I go? How do I get to my destination? They tell you, here's the path to go on. And then they add, and here's the path not to go on. It's equally valuable, even maybe more valuable. Because you can go on that path, not knowing, and make all the mistakes. So to know what not to do is just as important to know what to do. When you're trained by an expert, you're trained not just what to do, good habits, but also what not to do. That's a trial and error, so you don't have to repeat it. So the Neusen, the Matone, Ba'ayin Yofa is both paths. And that takes us back to what we spoke earlier about the cycles again. All the paths are part of a good story if you understand the bigger narrative. And it's the A. We visualize it. The A is not just shmiyah. You hear about it. When you visualize something, it becomes a reality. So imagine having embedded within you that clarity, the clarity of knowing the path to travel on, the path not to travel on. When we're faced with issues, with problems, with challenges, one of the hardest things is to find clarity. Ein simcha kataras sveikas. There's no joy as resolving doubts. The problem is we have blind spots. When you're negay b'davar, you're subjective, you have your biases, your prejudices. You can't always see clearly. That's why it's important to have someone else that helps provide clarity. The A is saying, behold, I'm giving you clarity. This is the path to live by. This is the path not to. When a person has that in life, can you imagine how much time is saved from all the energy, time, money that is wasted trying to find clarity. And often the problem is, as I said, is the blind spots. It's not just you don't find clarity. You create unfortunately, a bigger hole sometimes. So the Pasuk, the Parsha is telling us it's a time of clarity. And we always read it, Shabbos Mevorchim El, or Shabbos Chodesh El, Shabbos Mevorchim El this year. Exactly the transition, the bridge from Of to El, from the sadder moments, with the clarity, the clarity of the A, here's the blessing and here's the negative, and it's all part of one story. That's how we entered the month of El. Ri'iyah, Zen, to see. The power of sight, the resonating power. The Isamtus of Riyas, Chassidus explains, Ein Eid Nasa Dayan, that a witness cannot be a judge. Because once you witness something, it becomes such a reality, you can't be objective. You'll say, but what's the best thing? Is that the person himself witnessed a crime or witnessed to something? Yeah, but you need to be objective, because sometimes you see something, you don't always know what you saw. So a witness can be a judge. That's the power of seeing something. And the positive side is the resonance of seeing something. Shema Yisrael is also necessary. That brings it down and integrates it in details, and we can internalize it. When you see something you don't always see, you can't always say, I got it. You could say, I saw it. But when you hear the details, you can break it down into the Chachma and Bina. Chachma is Riyah, Bina is Shmiya. Reuven, Shimon. Okay. What personal and global lessons can we learn from this week's Parsha? Well, here we have the first. We live in a world today of moral confusion. Lack of moral compass. One more appropriate way to describe that than saying it's lacking the and the opposite of bracha. We don't have that clarity. People buying into narratives, literally a false narrative where they think light is dark, day is night, good is evil, evil is good, the perpetrator is the victim, and so on. This is what we need. So where do we look to? Torah semes, Torah eir. Torah illuminates. So in a dark path, a dark road, or a dark world, Torah illuminates. This is the right path, this is not. And sometimes you need to research it, you need to dissect it, you need the proper due diligence and discovery. But the goal is to achieve clarity. The clarity of the A. And this is both on a personal level and a global level. And the first place you always begin is to make sure you get rid of the biases. As I mentioned, that's why we talk to an objective party, a mentor, say l'charav, a friend, k'nei l'chachaver, a mashpia, a rov, a therapist, anyone that's qualified and experienced. The Rebbe always talks about Yedid reifa, Yedid mumche, a friend that's an expert. So many of us have experts that are not friends, and we have friends that are not experts. You need both. The expertise you need with experience and the knowledge to understand what to do. The friendship cares, the friend person cares. And the combination of both of them is very potent in a positive way. If the weekly Torah portion captures the energy of the corresponding time period, can the Parsha in which I was born tell me about my life's mission? Answer is yes, to some extent. Just as the day when you were born, the month, the Parsha, they all are signs, they all are indicators that have hints to who you are and your personality and so on. Remember, it's not predestined. It's predispositions. But it can give us insight. And you see it. You see how the Rebbe learns lessons from either special days, whether it's Yud Shvat, or Yud Tes Kislev, or Yud Aleph Nisan. The day matters. And the month in which it happens matters. And the Parsha in which it happens. Because these are all divine, talk about clarity. These are ways Hashem gives us some clarity to understand what is the unique energy of that given time. But we have to be careful, because you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to overread. People start looking at the Parsha, and every little detail that happens in their life, they start forcing the issue. And here too, we need to have someone objective that can help us make heads or tails. So we all need clarity, we all need the A. But someone born in this Parsha could be not that they need it more than others, but it could be they have more koyach to achieve that. Or they could end up being a mashpia themselves that provides that type of clarity. So we get directives from it and lessons from it, but we have to, as I said, not overdo it to the point, like somebody wrote the question, can it tell me what kind of life I should expect? Which direction should I go in life based on the theme of the Parsha? So there you need already, I think, an objective mentor or mashpia that can help with that. I say it can be an additional indicator, but to literally just go by the Parsha and answer questions like where should you live, who you should marry, that's like everything. It's part of the lessons, but with a certain measure and wisdom of knowing how much to take from it, how much has to be general, how much is specific, and so on. But there's no question Torah is Meloshen Hira, and the Torah has lessons, everything in life. The Shalah even goes ahead and says that when you read, let's say Chanukah is around Parshas Vayeshev Miketz, that you'll find hints to Chanukah, Vayeshev, and Miketz. But Chanukah happened thousands of years later after the Torah was given. Because the Torah is the blueprint for life. It's talk about Isa Bara Alma, the God looked into the Torah and created the world. So even though Chanukah happened afterwards, the Torah Kod M'Leilam, the Torah has hints to Chanukah. But again, everything with measure. In moderation, we say. Okay. In this Parsha, we also read, as I said, about the Beis HaMikdash. So someone asks a question, if prayer replaced the temple offerings, and they were only allowed to be brought in the temple, those offerings, then why are we allowed to pray at home? Good question. So in B'Sefer Yecheskel it says, Yecheskel asked Hashem, what will happen after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash? Now they don't have a Beis HaMikdash, so the Eibusha said, Ve'eyeh lehem Mikdash ma'at. They should build Bati Knesiyas, Bati Medrashas. A shul becomes like a Mikdash ma'at, a mini sanctuary, or a sanctuary microcosm. And that's why we daven in a shul. Similar to the offerings, tefillas became karbanos tiknum. The prayers replaced the offerings, and the shul is essentially like the Beis HaMikdash until Mashiach, of course, comes and rebuilds the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. Guarding a home, so first of all, there's halachas regarding it. Number one is that when you say tefillas keneged midin tiknum, that the prayers are like offerings, it still does not mean it's exactly like an offering. You can't bring a korban outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Tefillah you can do outside the Beis HaMikdash. Even a shul is not the Beis HaMikdash. That's number one. Number two, tefillah b'chlal is aveda shebelev. It's more of a spiritual form of offering. You're not actually bringing a physical animal, you're bringing the animal soul. And thirdly, we can build, our homes can become about Beis HaMikdash too. Mikdash Ma'at. When you turn your home, like the Rebbe speaks about turning a home into a Beis Teira, Avedig Milas Chasodim, a Beis Chabad. When your house is a house filled with learning, Teira, and Svarim, and a house filled with Tzedakah, a Pushka, and a house with a siddur. So your house becomes a form of a mikdash ma'at too. So all the above comes to help explain how we can daven. And again, davening is a Vedic Shabbat, wherever you may be, you can daven to Hashem. It's more conducive to daven in a shul. Okay. So let's continue something we began last week. Is Chassidus impacting our lives? So as I said, I began with a bunch of questions, some provocative. I began answering them, but I want to go more in depth into it because it's a topic that is always relevant, but especially lately, for some reason, I've been getting a lot more questions about it. It could be for different reasons. Firstly, maybe people are being more open. Secondly, there are other alternatives out there that people are experimenting with to try to find spiritual inspiration. And some are saying very bluntly, those are working, and Chassidus and Torah doesn't work for me. So I appreciate the honesty. But as I said last week, the problem is not the Torah Chassidus, God forbid. The problem is that we're not being taught it properly. If it's empty, something's lacking, it means it's lacking in us or in the way it's being taught. And that's what we need to correct. To find an alternative would be like someone drinking is very thirsty. And the water that they're drinking is not good, it's not working. It's toxic, whatever. So they start drinking other water, which is equally toxic or has other problems. That's not the solution. The solution is to find the healthy water. Ein mayim ela Torah. And in Torah itself, you have the Pnimis HaTorah, which is the Yayin Shebet Torah, Rozin Darais and Rozin Dirozin, the oil within Torah. And these are meant to be forces that help a person grow spiritually, their connection to Hashem, their divine consciousness. And yes, it's meant to lead us to the highest levels of connection to the highest levels of Elokus. Now, of course, human beings have blockages. They can be natural blockages, they can be ones that we've acquired, nature, nurture, traumas, losses, tragedies that have in some ways are impeding our ability to access our neshama. Question is, what do you do when you have that? So we know the concept of nit rishus l'refa l'rapis. That God gave a doctor the permission and therefore the ability to heal. Not because he's a healer, the doctor. Hashem, ani Hashem refecha. God is the healer. But he works through healers. And if they have the humility, they can be the shliach, they can be zeichid, the merit to be the shliach of Hashem to help bring healing. Same thing, God created medications. Medications that you wouldn't give to a healthy person, but if there's an impediment, or there's a problem, or something needs a balance, there's an imbalance, a deficiency, and so on, you have medications, just like we have vitamins. We have exercise. But how do you ensure that all this is being done in the right way, a Torah-dik way? Because there are definitely alternative methods. And the Torah forbids certain things too. You don't go to a witch doctor. You don't do certain types of ceremonies. There are things that are borderline or actual Avodah Zarah. So that's why we need the clarity, the A, to tell us what is what. That's why we say a Reifa, the Rebbe says Reifa Mumche, an expert. So how do you determine who's an expert? This one says this one's an expert, this one says he's not an expert. So there are rules for that as well. You need experts to tell us who experts are. Can the whole system be corrupt? There's corruption out there, no one's denying it. But the Torah would not give us directives if we can't find our way. And suddenly to become our own doctors. Look at how many letters the Rebbe writes. Don't become a doctor. Trust the doctors. And if you don't believe if you don't accept one doctor, go to a second. And if that doesn't work, go to a third and do the majority, which also makes total sense. The last thing you want to do is become the doctor that overrules all doctors, and you know better. That can lead to many problems. I think all of us can agree to that, because we're biased and prejudiced. And even if something worked for you, does not mean it's going to work for someone else. Be very careful. Be very responsible. The Rebbe gives us a methodology how to address it from a Torah point of view. But the point is to remember that Torah and Chassidus were brought, they also bring refuah la'ila, healing. I'm not talking about, you're not going to go to a Torah expert, a Rav, to do heart surgery. Or for that matter, a root canal. So when you're dealing with mental and emotional and psychological issues that are less tangible, what do you do then? There are certain things we can all agree you need a real expert, whether it's an eye doctor or a dentist or a heart doctor or a brain surgeon, etc. But there are areas that are more the emotional. There are areas, Tanya says, that this has all the eitzes and avedis Hashem. But avedis Hashem is not just ben adam l'mokim. It's not just between us and God. It's also between us and others. And the Alter Rebbe talks about the end of chapter 1. He talks about anger, and he talks about gaiva, arrogance, and he talks about slothfulness and laziness, and temptations and desires. Perikid Beis, he talks about as well about jealousy, resentment. Perikid Chavav, he talks about atzvus, depression, being demoralized, sadness. So here you need a wise balance. In the optimal world, we'd have people who learn Chassidus properly, who've been taught Chassidus properly, and can take Chassidus and help a person grow personally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And when needed, because of clinical reasons or for whatever reason, to go to an expert in a particular field, so be it. And you know how much to go, and there's a consultation. Like we know today, good doctors will often tell someone, speak also to your rabbi, to your mentor. Let's coordinate efforts. Literally, just a few days ago, I received a call from someone who's going to therapy, but they're now dealing with an issue where they, so to speak, an unwanted pregnancy in their marriage. I don't know if it's unwanted, we're looking into it. So the therapist and his patient, client, decided they need to talk to someone that knows a little more the spiritual, the Torah approach. So it's not just pure secular psychology. So I'm involved in that, just as an example. But there are boundaries that I would defer to someone who knows other issues, who may be a bigger expert in certain areas. So working together and coordinating is actually a very healthy thing. You see this with doctors all the time. A doctor will consult another doctor, or we'll go and we need a specialist in this particular area, because you really want the best. But let's go back to the bigger question. Last week, I'll read some of the questions I began. Are there people whose personalities and characters have been refined and transformed by Chassidus? I'm not even reading it with the full intensity that I got the letter, this note, this email, it's not email, it's from the forum. This question, where they say that they're criticized and say, I have not seen anyone that's been transformed. Anyone that's a nice, refined person is because they're by birth that way, or by culture, or by their homes. And it's an important question, because Chassidus comes, levader, lesakin, teva midesav, leshanis teva midesav, I should say, or midesav ativim, to change a person's personality, or the personality of his midas. It's a pretty strong statement. Birur ha'adam, birur ha'midas, birur ha'nefesh habamis. Nefesh habamis has all types of temptations. I mentioned the Daled Yeseidas Haroyim at the end of chapter 1 in Tanya. Do we know someone that's taken those elements, their gaiva, their arrogance, their anger, or rage, their jealousies, and have actually worked on it? So I have to say, yes, I know individuals, but it's not many people. And the fact that even if you'll say you don't see it, again, is that because Chassidus doesn't have the power to do it, or we're not being taught Chassidus the proper way? Something lacking in us, which is, of course, what I'm leading to. Why is Chassidus not inspiring many of us? And the third question I read is, how can we improve how Chassidus is being taught in our schools and ensure that it inspires and is internalized into the next generation? And I'll read a fourth question. How can we learn Chassidus not just conceptually, but as a practical guide for life? And perhaps that is the one that answers all of them. Because if we can learn it as a guide for life, then it would automatically resolve the other issues. So let me read it a little more in detail, some other questions, and go dig a bit deeper into this. Someone wrote, what is wrong with the learning system in our Chabad Mezes and how can we fix it? Dear Rabbi Jacobson, first of all, thank you for all the years of inspiring lessons. If Chabad Chassidus is a guide for life, why is it that it's not being taught in our Chabad Mezes that way? Why is it that the lessons that I learned from you and others are not the way I learned growing up in Chabad Mezes? I feel like only those that learned from certain mashpiyim can really say that they grasp Hasidic thought and connect them to day-to-day living life experiences. If I'm wrong, why is it that Chabad is losing so many young people who are sadly going OTD? And many others might not be officially OTD, but they're not keeping basic halachic laws like tznius and kashrus and Shabbos, as my generation and the previous generations have. What is wrong with the learning system in our Chabad Mezes, and how can we fix it in a way to inspire the young generation to fuse the chassidus that they learn with everyday life? And this will lead to another series of questions about davening and Avos Hashem, which I'll get to either this week or in the coming weeks. So, first thing, a big disclaimer. It's easy to point fingers and just be critical and say this is wrong and that is broken and so on. I want to acknowledge the efforts of mechanchim, of educators, and all the mezes. Unless some few exceptions, their intentions are good. And they're dedicated to this work. You could say they may not always have all the tools. Some may not be fully competent. And that's not my goal to identify those as unholis, and hopefully they will do what they have to do to improve the situation. But I think it's important to remember there are people who dedicate their lives to our children. Are they perfect? They're not perfect. And remember, they have to also work together with the parents. It's a partnership. To just expect the yeshivas and the system are going to solve all the issues is not realistic. First of all, a child lives at home as much as they go to school. Even if they go all day, they're still at home. And there's Shabbos and Yom Tov. And what happens when they see contradictory messages? So I think it's important. I don't want to just begin and sound like we're going now to badmouth and just criticize, which unfortunately often it happens. Is that what happens? It spirals out of control. And we just bash the systems and it doesn't have productive and to no productive end. So I think it's fine to be constructive in our criticism, but of all of us, including myself, including you, including all of us, and look at it like it's our problem, our issue. So let's go back to the beginning. There's one tremendous assumption we have to state, an axiom. Torah is from the Eibishter. The same God that created the human being with all the complexities of a human being, the Yetzer Tov, the Yetzer Hara, and all that can lead to, mild transgressions, bigger ones, are all created by God, not the transgressions, God forbid, but the situation of life where we have free will, and we will have distractions, and we'll have plenty of challenges in life. And some of them starts with the Chet Tzadas, start spiraling and beginning medechi al dechi and get worse and worse to the point of real criminal, violent, traumatic, abusive behavior. That's part of the reality. But God gave us a Torah. And Torah may be the full Elul. The Rebbe explains already in conceptually shel Torah Chassidus, not that Torah is a medication, that it was given only to you. Torah is so powerful. Torah is yichida, like he says there, primis ha-Torah, Chassidus is yichida. But it's so powerful that it even affects refuah. That's the point. Look in Perek Yud Ches there in chapter 18 in conceptually shel Torah Chassidus. So we have a Torah. Now you could say, I'm learning Torah, trying to follow its guidelines, and it's maybe good to know what is kosher, what is Shabbos, and overall how to build a beautiful home. But when there's a problem, and there's been a aberration, what do we say then? So Torah talks about that too. Torah talks about averos, sins, crimes, mechila, forgiveness, healing, tshuva. Plenty about healing. We were talking earlier about Chodesh Elul. The whole Chodesh Elul is about healing. After the breaking of the tablets due to the Chet Egel, which itself is an evolution of Chet Tzadas, which itself comes from Miyat HaLavona, Shviras HaKelim, and Tzimtzum HaRishon. So there's a whole process. So obviously when everything is going well, you don't see the cracks. But when things don't go so well, then you start saying, is Yiddishkeit responding to my problems? Many people will say it's not. So I want to tell you it's not Yiddishkeit, it's not Torah. It's the way it's being presented, and that may be part of the problem. Remember, Golus also affected how we learn Torah and how we apply Torah, including Chassidus. So I went through the system, like many of you did. I saw its strengths, I saw its weaknesses. I saw a different effect it had on different people, including myself. Is it at the highest level of presentation of Chassidus and Torah in general? No, it's not. I think we can all agree. The question is, what do we do to improve it? Unfortunately, there are many people who have given up on it and say, it's good for when things are very nice and everything is fine, not when there's real trauma and real problems. Others, when they hear that, they run the other direction. Everything is in Torah, and they go into denial. The problems are not real problems. You're just exaggerating. You want attention. It's become a fad. Extremes. Everybody runs into extremes. There's something in between. The Torah has the answers. Chassidus has the answers. Though every mentor, every mashpia, every teacher knows how to find the answers, knows the recipe, knows the formula, not necessarily. But if we go with the assumption that the Torah and Chassidus have the answers, and you have that full confidence, now we have to find it. I've dedicated my whole life to this work. Have I found the perfect solution? There's no perfection in this world. But I believe I've gone in that direction. And I know others have as well. So we have to see ourselves, are you part of the problem or part of the solution? Part of the problem means either you say there's no problems, or you just run away from Torah, you found other ways. And I know why people have done that, because they've been burned, they've been hurt. I know people who have very difficulty keeping Shabbos because they were abused on Shabbos. I don't judge them. We never judge. But we're trying to don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Klipose zarak, aval pri echel. You eat the fruit, throw out the peel. But it's not easy to do when it's snowballed, where a little child, an impressionable child, has been hurt by someone that loves them. So the love and the pain all came together. Not easy to separate. And as we know, trauma is not a rational thing per se. It just touches very deep vulnerabilities, the emotions. So can we find wise mashpiyim who learn Torah and Chassidus and have a way to teach it? And we'll turn to the right experts when needed. Or are we right now in a Wild West where everybody does whatever they want? And many criticize the whole Torah and Chassidus movement. Others run the other direction. That is our goal, and that's the whole point why I'm talking about this, for very productive reasons. So it's acknowledging what we're lacking, but also acknowledging the power of what we have. I have questions myself. Did the Rabbeim address the issue of child molestation? So you have a tshuva from the Tzemach Tzedek. You don't have a lot. It's one of my regrets. I wish I would have known, and I would have asked the Rebbe this question. I don't have a doubt that it's addressed, but it's not explicit as other things are. So developing a whole methodology, we'll call it a modality based on Torah and Chassidus, is a big passion. I would say one of the missions of my life, to create a new psychology. When I say new, I don't mean new, I mean original from Torah and Chassidus, but new for our times, for the future. Because at the end of the day, Mola Ores Deis Hashem Kamayim Liyom Machasim, V'lo Yeseh Kol Ha'elim El L'Dasas Hashem Elvad is Chassidus. A psychological model of how to understand the soul and how to actualize the soul and how to deal with problems when the soul is either trapped or blocked or impeded. We're coming from Bein HaMitzorim. Mitzorim means impediments. It means constraints. It means fears, insecurities. Mitzrayim, Mitzorim, Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim. all beginning with Yetzias Mitzrayim, the beginning of the journey. And we go from that into Shiva de Nechemte, from Tlosa de Paranusa to Shiva de Nechemte. 7 weeks of what? Of comforting. It's not just comforting and telling you, hey, it'll be good. Comforting is healing. So I've written up 3 weeks of affliction, 7 weeks of comfort in psychological terms. I've written articles. And there are others that have engaged in this type of discussion. So we have in Torah everything we need. But now we need to translate it. We need to present it. And there can be different approaches, but it's all based on that. Can we learn from, we'll call it secular psychology? There's certain things they may have figured out that we can definitely dialogue and cross-pollinate, if you wish, and synergize. So I could analyze the reasons, but it really comes down to a very simple thing. Before Chet Tzadas, everything was seamless. And Hashem embedded in human beings, and ultimately when Torah was given, it was all given in order to give us a healthy approach to life. Physical health, spiritual health, Cheli HaGuf, Cheli HaNefesh, as the Rambam says. But Golus, and I mean Golus, I mean even after Chet Tzadas, every dissonance that took place, in the words of the famous Medrash that's brought in Basel Legani, every generation the Shekhinah became more concealed, created a deeper dissonance between the divine and existence, between the spirit and matter, between Nefesh and Guf. To the point where Alter Rebbe says in chapter 32 in Perek Lamed Beis, Lev and Tanya, that Ava, the Yesod of Ava is that Nafshe Iker Gufei Tofel. If someone's Guf is more important than their Nefesh, you won't have true love. And true love here is seamless, healthy, nurturing. Selfishness will come into play. And selfishness in turn will turn into narcissism in certain instances, and will definitely not provide the nurturing and reinforcement and validation and the healthy attachments a child needs, in turn creating the void and vacuum that allows for trauma and allows for addictions and allows for all the other problems, all originating in the Tzimtzum addition. But we have a solution. You bring a Eir Hakav, Teira Eir, and this needs to be turned into methodology. So it makes sense that over the generations, we may have not lost, God forbid, the Torah, but we may have lost all the sensitivities necessary, the language. The Baal Shem Tov came, this is what we're told, that the world was in a dark state, was Yisrael, was in a state of hisalfus, faint, a comatose state spiritually. There was Torah, but spiritually there was plenty of dissonance between those that knew knowledge, between the simpler Jews, between the moyach and the lev, the mind and the heart, between the soul and the body, materialism and spirituality. The assimilation that developed is all this expression of this dissonance, that the spiritual, the neshama of Yiddishkeit was lacking. So the technical didn't work for everyone, and it was easy to forsake, because when you have you have a mitzvah without kavanah, you have a body without a soul. What do you think is going to happen? It will alienate, and many people will leave it. But it's all not the Torah the problem. It's the way we presented it and the Golus issues that took over. We need to now correct. There's plenty of work to be done. So our Moshes and Yeshivas are also affected by all of this, to some extent. We have to acknowledge that. So now how do we reclaim the beauty, the treasure that Torah and Chassidus provides us in giving us a model for spiritual, healthy, emotional, psychological health? That has to be the goal. That has to be taught. There are mashpiyim who don't accept what I just said. I have mashpiyim who told me, you think you're going to make Tanya relevant? I said, how could you be mashpiyah and ask such a question? The whole point of Tanya is to be relevant to our personal lives. So there are distortions out there. But again, that is all reik mikem. The problem is the people, not the Torah and Chassidus. So in answering all these questions, the answer is yes, we need to make Chassidus a practical guide for life. And when we do, it will inspire, it will empower, it'll become indispensable. We have to make it indispensable, not optional. Something that we must have in our lives, just like we need oxygen and water. Oxygen. Then we read a word in a Parsha. or learn any shtickle Gemara or halacha. We see the neshama in it. We see how it's our life and our sustenance, not just a nice legal theory or legal idea. And it's not just mitzvahs anoshim ulamoda that we just do it by rote and robotically. It's all infused with passion. Will we be perfect? We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for direction, for an approach. And we can definitely achieve this. That's what the Rabbeim came for. Starting from the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab, Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe. Why did they pour out Chassidus? They spilled sweat, blood, and tears, Mesidus Nefesh, writing Chassidus, teaching Chassidus, applying Chassidus, the Neguneh Chassidus, the Anmidas Chassidus, Nhogas Chassidus, Darkei Chassidus. So we have plenty to work with. And it has had an impact. I know people have been transformed, but there's a lot more to go. So when we see a student in yeshiva, a boy or a girl, and it's not speaking to them for whatever reason, a good mashpia, a good teacher has to go over and figure it out. Sometimes you have to do it very delicately. There can be things at home that are a problem. Person's personal makeup, there could be things going on in school. Do we have the resources? Some say we don't have the special resources needed for every chanech l'nar pidarke, for every student. So we have to work on that. It should be identified what the problems are. And then take Torah and Chassidus and show how it can enrich every person. Yes, there's some talmidim that are more academic, and some are more emotional, and some are more creative, and some have more zitzfleisch than others. Everybody has to be addressed. And it should be done without judgment and without pointing fingers, without accusations, because that always creates defensiveness, and then people don't respond, and then people just, each one digs in, and I know best, etc. My goal is to talk about this and get us all together. Let's think about it. Anyone wants to have a conversation on this matter, time allowed, time permitted, I will be happy to engage in such a conversation, to do my little part. Here we have this platform to bring it to the table. And I rest assured, if you don't get it from the source, people are going to look elsewhere. And they're already looking elsewhere. It breaks my heart when I hear how someone says, I went to something else, to a ceremony, to plant medicine, to others, because Torah Chassidus didn't do it. I'm not judging them. You know, when you're desperate, you're desperate. To me, it's a validation of the person's need. That's for sure true. But why couldn't they find it? What was not taught properly? And as far as plant medicine goes and other things that I'm mentioning or alluding to, so there too, there's also Torah guidelines with that. That's another discussion which we talked about a while back. I'll talk about it again. But I don't see it as a competition. I just see it as the human condition has needs. And some have deeper needs than others, and everybody's gone through different challenges. We have to find the Torah Chassidus approach. And if need be, so be it. But that has to be also done not in a desperate way, and not shooting from the hip, and not just grabbing for every straw. You know, drowning victims will pull down even a lifeguard that's going there to save them, because they're desperate. I understand the desperation. But we have, thank God, the gift of Torah and Chassidus. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu magdim refuah lamaka. He preceded the illness with healing. The healing that comes through a connection with your neshama. That is the key. The connection to the neshama. Moed ani lefanecha, the Rebbe said was his favorite tefillah. Shechzarta bin nishmosi. What's a neshama? Are we teaching it to our children when we say with them Moed ani? And what means neshama shenasata bitahiri? Ata barasa, ata yitzarta, ata nafachta biv, ata meshamra. You protect it within me means it needs protection, because there are things that attack. We're vulnerable. We're fragile. All that needs to be translated into practical language. That you have a neshama and you're valuable and you're absolutely needed and you have a mission in life. And very much Chassidus Applied really began over 12 years ago. There was a void that was quite prominent then, and that's when I felt was the right timing. I always felt the need for it, but everything has its timing. So let us put our heads together Take the great gift we were given, the Chem de Gnuza, within the Chem de Gnuza, Primis HaTeira, the Nefloyus of Primis HaTeira, the wonders, as the Rebbe says, Yitas Kislev Tov Shalom et Zayin. Ayin Beis is Nefloyus, wonders even compared to the wonders of Samach Vov. I discussed it, I wrote an essay to explaining Ayin Beis, and I tried to explain what the Rebbe meant by that. But these are wonders, these are tremendous resources, gifts, treasures, that we have available to us that we have to access. And that's the whole purpose of MyLife Chassidus Applied. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Everyone have a good Tavach, the end of Chodesh Av, and going into the Shabbos of Varchim Elul. Next week we'll have a continued class on Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of Rosh Chodesh. Both in the general sense, but also in the personal sense. Transformation of anything that's negative, any tragic events, any sadness and loss, and we've had some, to be transformed into tremendous joy and celebration. Transformation, not ignoring, not denying, but channeling and harnessing it. Be well and kol tuv.
This program is brought to you by MyLife Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.